Hi, I'm Luke.
And this is Lukewarm.
One of the hardest things about learning a new language is that the words in any tongue can have figurative meanings that differ from their literal meanings. In order to completely understand a new language, it is important to learn both the figurative and literal meanings of common words and phrases. The literal understanding of a word or phrase refers to its denotative meaning.
If you looked up the word clam on dictionary.com, you'll find the denotative meaning of the word.
It's helpful to remember that the denotative meaning of a word is its dictionary definition. Both words, dictionary and denotative, start with the letter D. However, if someone tells you to clam up,
the denotative meanings of these two words are nonsensical.
The figurative or connotative meaning of
clam up is a command to be quiet.
Clam up connotatively makes sense.
The opposite ends of a clam's shell are joined by a hinge
and can be made to open and close like a person's mouth. So if someone tells you to clam up, make like a clam before you
spill the beans or beat a dead horse.
If you memorized a German dictionary but had no experience communicating with native speakers of the language, your ability to translate their language could lead to some potentially unfortunate misunderstandings. For instance, the German expression
Da steht der Bär, translated in English, means the bear dances there.
Someone unfamiliar with German idioms might avoid dancing bears altogether, which would be a mistake because the connotative meaning of Da steht der Bär is
it will be a good party.
The word-for-word translations of idioms in other languages rarely reveal the connotative meanings that native speakers know so well. In Spanish,
to stay like a stone means that one is amazed by something.
And in British English, if someone asks you to stop
having kittens, they're asking you to stop freaking out. FluentU.com is a great resource for language learners and possesses lists of many idioms unique to particular languages, which I suggest you check out.
When looking through these idioms myself, I found it interesting that very different languages created idioms to describe the same idea. In both Mandarin Chinese and English, for example, both languages created an idiom to represent the idea of love at first sight. What are idioms? Idioms are common expressions, particular to specific languages or dialects, in which the connotative and denotative meanings of the words differ.
I've mentioned 7 idioms already in this video.
In a broader sense, idioms belong to a group of similar concepts, generally referred to as figures of speech or figurative language.
Figurative language similarly belongs to a larger family of ideas, which are often called literary or poetic devices. There are many more literary and poetic devices not included on this graphic, but these are some of the most common ones you may encounter. Theme, allegory, and symbolism are not usually considered to be figures of speech, but are dependent on their use, which is an idea I will come back to in a moment.
Even though it's lacking a few branches, a family tree representing figurative language might look something like
this. Its trunk is dominated by the metaphor, which is perhaps the simplest of all the figures of speech, and it leads outward toward more complex ideas, such as hyperbole, allusion, and the idiom. Finally, allegory, theme, and symbolism represent the ultimate expression of figurative language, as their existence depends on figurative meaning established throughout a story.
Unlike figurative language, theme, symbolism, and allegory can only truly be understood when they are part of a narrative. Think of the last movie that you saw or book that you read. Now, let's compare that story to this iceberg.
The top of the iceberg represents the general content and events within a story, such as information related to the plot, setting, general characterization, etc.
This small piece of the iceberg is to be understood literally and contains the denotative information in the story. The much larger whole of the iceberg lies beneath the surface, and so does the wealth of information most stories contain.
These ideas and messages are carefully created by attaching figurative meanings to the events, characters, and objects described throughout a given narrative. By comparing the two metaphors of the tree and the iceberg, it's easy to see how the surface meaning establishes figurative meaning.
Taking the time to understand the figurative and literal meanings behind a story or an everyday conversation can reveal a lot about the language and the cultures that use it. This might be the most difficult part about learning a new language, and I hope that this video has given you a framework for understanding the role figures of speech fulfill no matter the tongue. In the description of the video, you'll find a link to all the sources I used to put together this episode of Lukewarm. Thanks for watching.